And how did you come to write a book about Cleopatra? What was the appeal of that subject?
It was an idea that we were literally sitting at dinner one night and the question of what did Cleopatra do all day came up. And this became kind of a family joke of like, you should write a book about what Cleopatra did all day. And then the joke became, when her diaries turn up, you can do this. And it just kind of got tossed around. It was on all my lists of possible subjects for a long time. And then, as I said, I went to France and researched and wrote the Franklin book. And somehow at the end of that process, I thought, you know what? The idea of someone where there's a great deal of just give around the edges of the story where we don't really know the narrative was an interesting narrative challenge. And I went back to read Plutarch, as one does, and realized that we have like actual quotations we have actual speeches between Mark Antony and Cleopatra. And that's when I thought, you know, if we have dialogue of some kind, you could maybe write an episodic, you know, Cleopatra in 5 scenes kind of book. And then the more I researched, the more I realized there was actually a fabulously rich vein of material, and that if you wrote the book with from a certain angle, you could actually weave a complete narrative.
So there was a famous movie about Cleopatra
which I've never seen.
Okay, Elizabeth Taylor.
I've heard about that movie.
But the theory was that Cleopatra was the most beautiful woman in the world and so forth. That's why Elizabeth Taylor, I guess, was picked to play her. She was also thought to be beautiful, and she was. And was Cleopatra really, at the time, thought to be the most beautiful woman in the world, or what was her appeal?
You see, that's one of the reasons to write a book about Cleopatra. No, decidedly not. And all the ancients are very clear on this subject, that she was not a beauty, but as Plutarch writes, the contact of her presence was bewitching, that she was charming beyond all measure, spoke 9 languages, and the 10th was flattery, that she was incredibly charismatic and incredibly ingratiating in her manner. So there's a real, I mean, you definitely get the sense of a woman who changes the temperature of a room when she walks in. I mean, it helped that she's the richest person in the Eastern Mediterranean, hands down.
Did she had a relationship with Julius Caesar and also with Mark Antony?
And she manages amazingly to have children with both of them, which is an extremely strategically smart move. If you're trying to get the Romans to back your empire.
Did those children rise up and become rulers?
They have pretty unhappy ends for the most part. By the time she is conquered, it is impossible to let her children survive her. So they come to pretty miserable ends.
And several thousand years after she lived, do we know where she's buried?
There's a search currently underway, as I'm sure there has been for years. This search has been 20 years in the making for her tomb. It's really hard to figure out where it could be. The entire coast of the Mediterranean around Alexandria has changed. We know she's buried in an Isis temple. There were something like 300 Isis temples at the time. We think she was buried with Mark Antony, and we know that that was within a day's ride of her palace. So, you know, it does limit the possibilities, but it also gives you a tremendous amount of terrain over which to search.
Did she ever write who she thought was a better lover, Julius Caesar or Mark Antony? Or
she leaves one word to us, or one expression to us, and the expression, which is one word of Greek, is "let it be done," and that's the only thing. And even that may not be in her handwriting, but that's the only word of hers that we have to this day.